Okay, this video, we're going to show you some handy steps that you can take, do it yourself, to keep rats out of a crawl space and then keep them also from potentially getting from the crawl space up into the actual living area. So I'm over at a rental unit that we own, and we had a complaint recently that the tenant above us on the first floor here could hear rats in the walls. Clearly that's a big issue. Then you can even have a situation where they're not just in the walls, but they're finding a way out of the walls into the units themselves, which would be even a bigger issue. So for frame of reference, the crawl space here behind me is it's a dirt. Essentially the house is built on these pylons, and then it's just earth back here. So after inspecting the area, I found a couple things we're going to need to address. The first, which we'll cover in this video, is to make sure that even if they're down in this crawl space, they have no way to get up into the walls or into the units above us. Then in the second video, what we determined over here is that the modern PVC plumbing is completely intact, but this house is about 100 years old or so, and at some point previously there had been ceramic plumbing that appears to still be attached from the sewer below us, but it must end somewhere below the surface because it looks like rats are being able to climb up that and then dig little holes here and there and essentially use this crawl space as a staging point to then either try to get up into the units or go out into the neighborhood with their party with their rat friends, and at the end of the night come back to the safety of the sewer through this house. So we definitely want to try to stop that, and then that will discourage them from even wanting to be down here. And then the final thing we'll cover in a third video is, detailing the exterior walls here to make sure that not only are they able to get up and then up into the units above us, but that they can't be getting in out of the side here from the ground level. So before we get started, friendly reminder to always wear the appropriate safety gear. You can see I have on some work gloves, knee pads, safety glasses, and then I will be wearing a mask. I just took it off to do this piece so you could understand me. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so in order to make sure that no critters are able to get up into the units above us, what we're effectively going to have to do is explore the entire, underside of this floor to look for areas and gaps big enough that something could actually get up. So right off the bat, here's the crawl space door. I can see right away there's some holes up here. Let me try to get a little closer. Now, I don't know that a rat could necessarily fit through there, but most certainly could, and they could even climb right up here. So for things like this, what we can use is either steel wool or copper mesh. Got examples of each right here. Here's copper mesh. Here's a piece of steel wool. They both do the same thing. Advantages of copper mesh is it's a little cleaner to work with, and it doesn't have so many filaments. It gets so fibrous. But the advantages of steel wool is it's definitely cheaper. So for things like this, what we're going to do is we're going to take our piece of steel wool and we're going to shove it up into that hole. And ultimately, rats don't really like to chew through that stuff or get their nose in it. So if it's pretty good and snug, you can feel pretty comfortable. They're not going to want to push it out of the way. If it's a bigger gap, we're going to have to use more than steel wool or copper mesh that we'll talk about here in a second. Okay, so now you can see that I've completely stuffed those with steel wool, even around that edge in case it's big enough for a mouse to get through. We'll continue to look along the walls. Yeah, here's some potential gaps, but what I would say is, if there was rodent activity coming up through there, they would have already pulled away that insulation. The fact that it's intact probably means that they're not doing anything there, but we'll probably shove a little more steel wool back in that corner as well, as to be sure. And then we're going to continue to go down and look through all these different spaces throughout the underside here and make sure we find all our gaps. Okay, so as we look for all the places potentially that rats could get up into the units from the crawl space, here we're on the exterior wall. This right here is the subfloor to the first unit floor, and what I can see is from above the support beams here that it's just open, and if I shove my hand up there, I can feel up at the back that you can actually get up between the walls. If I feel down is flush to the outer wall of the house. So I think they're not getting down there, but if they can scurry up here, or they found an easier place behind here, they can be getting up. And between these joists, this issue exists all the way down the house. So we're gonna need to address that. Now this is a little bit bigger gap. So in that previous smaller hole you saw, we could just firmly get some steel wool or copper mesh snug in there. They'd be hard to get out of place. This we're probably gonna have to do a little bit more than just, it would take a lot of copper mesh or a lot of steel wool to really get that snug where they couldn't maybe just kind of paw it out of the way or off to the side. So I'll show you how to do that here. Okay, so here what you can see I did is I stuffed some copper mesh in there, but in these bigger gaps, I'm not confident that it's hard to get it from staying kind of loose. So to make sure there's no way they can get through that, we're gonna use this Great Stuff Pest Block. It's essentially an expanding foam. It's also an insulant, helps with your heat costs, and it has a bitter taste that rodents don't like to chew through. So the way we use this stuff is we shake it up. You gotta make sure you shake it nice and good for 60 seconds. We've already done that here. So then what we're gonna do, let me get between my legs here, pop the cap off. This applicator tool comes with it. You screw that on, and then you essentially dispense by, lightly squeezing on these triggers. So let's get up there. And what we're gonna do is we're slowly gonna just fill it in. You can see how it expands. There, you don't need to do it excessively. That will get a lot larger. Here you can see example I already did where I probably over applied, and it really does pillow out a lot, and it's gonna stay nice and secure in there so the rats, even if they were to climb up, sit right here, they're not gonna be able to get up through there and into the walls. So we're gonna keep doing these all the way down between the joists, and then continue to look for any other spots or gaps. Okay, so now we're over by the plumbing. You can see the main stack coming down here that goes into the sewer below us. But here's one issue that I actually identified earlier and fixed before starting this video. So I'll pause here to show you what it used to look like here. There's a big open gap where this pipe came up in these two spots. Okay, so on something like this, yeah, could we have potentially used some combination of trying to cover that whole area with copper mesh or steel wool, or just foam it up with the Great Stuff anti-pest block? But pretty big gap, seemed it was easier. This is the standard aluminum sheet metal. I had to use it in a couple different pieces because of the two spots that the pipe goes up into the wall, but I feel like I'm pretty confident the size of this gap, this was one of the major ways they were getting up there. So now that we got the sheet metal just screwed into the underside of the subfloor, and we stuffed some steel wool around the edges of the pipe to make sure there's no gaps, I feel pretty good they're not getting up there. Okay, we've done a detailed inspection now across the entire underside of this floor. You saw where we filled in, coin-sized holes with just some steel wool or copper mesh, or kind of behind us here, we see between all of these joists going down, where we used the Great Stuff anti-pest block in addition to make sure that it would stay in place. And you also saw when we looked up at all this plumbing over here that we used some sheet metal for bigger gaps and make sure that they can't get up there. So now I feel like we've fully inspected this whole underside, and I think that I feel pretty confident they will no longer be able to get up in between the walls and potentially into the units. So that's the end of this video. And then in the second video, we will talk about what we're going to do to keep them from coming up from the sewer.